It was like one of the worst cases of imposter syndrome that I experienced. Like my confidence was shot. And I don't know why. It was like all self-talk. And I feel like the self-talk was what got me there. And it was the self-talk that took me out of there too. It was both ends. Like I had convinced myself that I didn't belong there and that everyone was gonna know it. And then I somehow had to take that same, self-talk.
Hola mujeres, welcome back to the show. I am super excited to have Hady Mendez with us today, author of Calladita No More, who is celebrating the release of her book this year. So Hady, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Lucy, for having me. I appreciate it. Hola, audience.
Thank you for being here. So, I wanted to bring you to the show because I started reading your book and it was very relatable. And I want us to just celebrate your journey into sharing your story, first of all, but also invite other mujeres who might be struggling with decision making, with feeling like maybe they are overlooked, overworked, and even struggling to share their voice. So, can we start by sharing a little bit about you for those people that are not familiar with who you are?
Of course. So I'm Hady Mendez, pronouns she, her, ella. I'm the founder and CEO of Boldly Speaking, and we are focused on amplifying the voices and I would say like transforming the experiences of underestimated people in the workplace. So that's really the objective of the organization. And I wrote a book. I also speak. I do workshops. I do coaching. I work with employee resource groups. So a little bit of everything, but I think a lot of it is really rooted in this notion of empowering, providing the skills, the tool set, the tips that underestimated people need so that they can really thrive in the workplace or wherever they choose to be. So that's about me. And then I spent like 25, 30 years in corporate, and I'm based in New York. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Hattie. And you have such a diverse experience with all of the roles that you hold throughout the years that had led you to essentially share this story in Calladita No More. Can you walk us through a little bit about how did you grow up and what was your relationship with money?
Yeah, I like that question. I like talking about money. I didn't share this story in the book, but you're giving me the opportunity to do it now. So I grew up in Brooklyn. I'm the youngest of four sisters. I'm Puerto Rican, and I'm technically New Yorican since I was born in Brooklyn and to my Puerto Rican parents. So that's kind of the context. We grew up in the projects, and we didn't have a lot of money. So that's sort of like I'll just put that part out there. But my dad was a business owner, which is like super interesting because now I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm like, shit, I had it in my blood the whole time. So like, but my dad owned a shoe store in Brooklyn, and he didn't make a lot of money, but we were like working class family, and we had enough to eat and, support, I guess, the community, offer a service to the community by way of the business. And so I actually, so a couple stories about money. One is that my mother always used to make my father give us money when we got good grades. So that was one thing. So I was compensated for good grades. And usually I always had good grades. First of all, I was like a really good student. So over the years, it ended up being more and more money. But sometimes it was like $25. Sometimes it was $40. It's like, give your children got a good report card. They get money for that. So that's one. Two is I worked in my father's shoe store since I was about 10 or 11, and I always got paid to work in my father's shoe store. So I don't remember, it wasn't really like an hourly rate. It was more like $40 for the day or $20 for the day or whatever I worked. So I always got paid from de chiquita. So my mother instilled in him that it was like they get paid for their time. I guess the older we got, the more we got, but also we had more skills at that time. So I feel like she was also like compensate. We were getting promotions throughout the years, so that was good too. And then the last thing I would say is that I saved all my money. So I didn't have a piggy bank, but I had a Band-Aid box, and I would put my money in my Band-Aid box. And I was always saved. I saved all my money. I didn't what do you need when you're 10 or 11? Not much. So I whatever $20, $40, whatever I got, I would put in the Band-Aid box. And I had several $100s saved at one point. And mira que one of my sisters took a loan from me. She was like, she needed money. I don't know for what reason. And somebody was like, you should borrow the money from Hadi. And don't you know, she borrowed the money from me. And then we had an agreement that I was going to get interest back for that money. I don't think that's typical for la Latina family, or that the Latina experience, to have all that experience with money. The other thing I would say is that my mother did not have a bank account or a credit card, so I was used to people dealing with cash at all times. And my parents they used to literally put money debajo de la cama, en los muebles, adentro de la nevera, encima del chinero, en un bolsillo de un pantalón. Like that's how ellos guardaban dinero. And I knew like that was not it. Like I was like, yeah, there's like interest you're not getting. I don't know at what age I realized that they weren't getting interest, but I was like, that doesn't feel safe. Like, what if the house burns down? Or something like that. That's why my dad moved the money into the fridge. So he was like, if the house burns down, hopefully the money will survive.
Queda frío en el refrigerador.
Yeah, but yeah, I would say I had a lot of money experience at an early age, and none of it was bad. Oh, the other thing I will tell you that was really interesting related to money is that my father used to send me to go get the money orders because he didn't like having cash in the store. So as soon as he had like $200 or $300, he would send me to go get money order like down the street. And I used to walk around with money in my pocket. And I was young. I was like 9, 10 years old. And I used to have a couple $100s in my pocket. So like I was comfortable dealing with money, and I remember that the guy he would send me to, the place that he would send it to was we lived in a Latino neighborhood, but era un judío. And y él contaba el dinero. Like I would be like, I need a money order for $300. Y yo iba donde él all the time, so he knew me. But he would take his sweet time and he would count the money. And I used to count with him. Like I was like, yeah, there are $300 there. I know it because I counted it too. But even when my father would count it, then I would count it, and then the man would count it. And anyways, I don't know, lots of little experiences with money, but I don't have issues with money. Gracias a Dios.
It sounds to me like you had a lot of positive, beautiful money memories. And even you're saying these, like I could picture
It's
it like
fun.
walking.
Yeah, it was fun memories with money. Agreed.
I love that. I love that. Now, Hadi, I know a little bit about your story, but I also want to invite you to share with the audience, why did you decide to start writing this book?
Yeah, I think if I like boil it down, I think it boils down to that I wanted to have a greater impact in the community. I wanted to give back, pour back into the community, and I wanted to have it like be meaningful. And, doing talks is great, writing blog posts is great. I have a Substack, that's great. So I do LinkedIn live shows, so I do have lots of content that I create, and I do have a great reach, and I'm grateful for that. But I thought like, ooh, the book would be really interesting because that's even bigger impact, and it's like a legacy, and I'm leaving it behind, and maybe I'll write more books. And I actually started off writing a chapter in one book called Awareness Put Me On, and it was like a project that a lot of us did together. I was like, ooh, I like that. That was fun. I have something to say. Yeah, I didn't realize, serte franca, I didn't realize that I had such a strong point of view on so many things. And then so many cuentos, so many stories, so many experiencias. And I was like, if I put all of this together, there's a there. And then I love that I include the refranes because that's like a nod to my parents, my abuelos, like the ancestors, if you will. I wanted to include them and bring them into the conversation. And I feel like so many of us, when we're like, we're first gen, we're doing everything alone. And it's like, yes, and we also have a little bit of wisdom that our abuelos gave us. And I wanted to take advantage of, including that and bringing that into the conversation as well. So there's refranes all over the book and the beginning of every chapter and even inside the chapters too.
And I love that part about the way you write, because it made it very relatable, but it also made it like nostalgic a little bit for me when I was reading your book, and I was like, oh, I remember that. And I would call my mom and say, Mom, ¿te acuerdas de esto? Like I started like even sharing parts of your book with my mom.
Oh, I love that.
It has been a very, yeah, nostalgic way of like remembering a lot of our roots. In your book you talk a lot about confidence, and even the way you write is obviously very, very bold, very confident. And a lot of mujeres struggle with confidence because they feel like, I don't have it. How does one become confident?
Oh, that's such a hard question to answer. I don't know if I know entirely the answer, but I can tell you what worked for me. And I think that's an important sort of caveat for this conversation is that I can't tell you that what worked for me is going to work for you. I don't know that because you bring your own context and your own history and story into the conversation. So, maybe it's not going to be as easy or as difficult as it was for me. It might be easier, it might be more challenging. But for me, I tell a very specific story about how I was invited to a senior leadership retreat, and how I felt so nervous going, and I didn't think I was going to be dressed the right way. And I thought people were going to ask me like, what are you, oh, I didn't think you were going to be here. What are you doing here? You're not an SVP. Like, why are you here? I was a director at the time, and most of the people were SVP and above. And so I was shook. And it was like one of the worst cases of imposter syndrome that I experienced. Like my confidence was shot. And I don't know why. It was like all self-talk. And I feel like the self-talk was what got me there. And it was the self-talk that took me out of there too. It was both ends. Like I had convinced myself that I didn't belong there and that everyone was gonna know it. And then I somehow had to take that same, self-talk and say, well, what if you maybe quote unquote don't belong there because you're not an SVP, but like people thought that you have potential to be there, that you are going to be a future leader of the organization, that maybe you have something important to contribute, that they wanted more Latinas and women of color in the table, and they thought that you would be a good representation of that group. Like I had to tell myself lots of stories to convince myself like, oh, maybe you do belong there. And I remember specifically there was another Latina that was invited as well, and she and I, we just like, we kept hyping each other up. We were like, oh my God, like, what were you talking about in your table? And this is what we did, and this, that, and third. And I said, I'm going to play with it. I'm going to abrir la boca. I'm going to be brave. I'm going to like, I was like faking it. And I was like, I'm going to fake it till I make it. So I was at my table and I was like, there's not a lot for me to lose. But if I make a good impression, there's a lot that I can gain from being here because I'm going to get this visibility that I wouldn't otherwise have gotten. And so that's what I did. And I just I played with it. I brought my personality. I was like, I'm going to talk about me. I'm just going to be me. And like, that's a scary proposition in some spaces to just be who we are. But like in the end, that's the superpower that we bring, is to just be us. Right. And so I brought myself in my entirety and I had fun and I took some chances and like just played a little bit. And by the end, when I was on the plane, I was like, like, I just felt so good about like having been there and having fully participated and having like given my point of view in certain conversations that I think, quite frankly, the conversation would not have gone the same if I wasn't there to say, hold up, wait a second, like, have you thought about what that might feel like for this group of people or this type of person or something like that? So yeah, I have fun with it.
I love that. You're like a natural advocate for people. Just reflecting back on the story you share about your dad and now at work, I'm like, yeah, you've always been a natural advocate for people. Now, throughout your book, you share so many stories that are so relatable, but one that got my attention, and that's chapter 3, by the way, for those of you that will get the book. You also talk about getting a demotion.
Yes.
And can you touch a little bit without giving too much away because we want people to buy and purchase your book?
Okay.
How did you navigate that transition from getting the demotion, and what were some like couple of things that it taught about you, like that it taught you about you and the work that you do?
Yeah, I'll start off also and back up and say that I think I provide every single scenario that you're going to experience in the workplace in this book. So I got demotion, I got overlooked for a promotion, I got promoted with my friend when we thought that another, like, it was only going to be one of us and both of us got promoted. I talked about like a place where, they brought me onto a team and then they said, just kidding, we're not going to use your expertise. And then I ended up getting moved into a different team and I started thriving in that role. And so I talked about a lot of different scenarios because I wanted to be helpful. So I feel like I need to talk about a lot of things. But the demotion one had to do with it was like an acquisition. So think of it like a merger, and two teams were coming together and they were evaluating like who's gonna stay and who's gonna go, essentially, because it was a lot of duplication of people in roles. And yeah, and also the headquarters was now based in a different physical location. And at the time, I used to walk to work, which is like a dream. And they were like, "No, get in your car and drive an hour and a half to this other place so people could get to know you and you could be and make sure that you like keep your role." And I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. Like I'll do that once, but I don't know if like that's gonna be like sustainable, and I don't know if I want it that bad. And so, you have to, in order to, um, go up in the ranks, you do have to be a little bit like risk tolerant, like take some risks. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do that because no le tengo to know me. They didn't get to know me enough. And in my previous company, I was in the sales team. And when they merged them, they put me in the account team. And that was definitely a lower role. And, but then I talk about how I don't stay where I'm not valued and appreciated. I don't stay where I don't want to be. Like if that's not my thing, why would I just be accepting of that? And you might have to accept it for a little while. Like, we can't snap our fingers and be where we want to be next, but we could be like, this is not where I see myself staying. And what is my plan? Plan A, plan B, plan C, because we all need plans and we need exit strategies. And I feel like that was always me. I was always like, okay, this didn't work out how I thought it was going to work out. What's the plan? And then you just start working, activating that plan, whatever the plan is going to be. And like I said, sometimes you need a couple of plans and be like, okay, this is the first thing I'm going to try and do. If this doesn't work out, then this will be the second thing I try to do, etc. And I feel like I always do that. And it's good. It's almost like being like you're like, dipping and diving and you're just like, you can't get me. You can't keep me stuck. Like I'm gonna go where I belong and where I want to be. And so it's like you
Yeah.
could try, but you may not succeed.
Thank you for sharing that. So I wanted to ask you about this specific chapter, which again is chapter 3, because a lot of mujeres struggle with that permission to expand, permission to say, I'm not value here anymore. But there's also the fear of, holy crap, like, okay, if I leave this role, where would I go? Or if I leave this job that I have, what would happen to my title? Because a lot of us have a lot of identity attached to a job and a job title. So thank you for sharing that. Now, I also want to bring up a couple more things that I read on your book that I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Chapter 8, you talk about Nadie is coming to save you. And throughout your career and what I know about you, you have always been 3 steps ahead. But there's also so many of the listeners that are waiting for that permission to build, permission to get promoted, permission to do really like live in their purpose. So, what would you say to that listener that is still waiting for someone to come and save them?
Well, first and foremost, I would say no one's coming. So, like, understand that. And that might take a little bit of time to process. I remember someone telling me that. And I was probably about midway through my career when someone said that to me. And it was such a profound moment because I was like, what? Like, in that moment, I realized that I was waiting. I was waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder and say, you're a great employee. Come this way. We're going to promote you and we're going to make you. No, that's not going to happen. I was waiting for the manager that was going to be like, you're great. I'm going to, advance you or I'm going to recommend you to this thing and that almost rarely happened too. So I think I started off expecting that, keep your head down, work hard and someone's going to recognize you. Like that's, the stuff that we're fed. And I realized a través del tiempo that that wasn't happening to me. And I don't think it was happening to that many people, but it certainly wasn't happening to me. And so when someone finally said that to me, you got to save yourself because no one's coming for you. It really hit me hard and it made me realize it, but it was empowering too at the same time because then you're like, that means I got to do it. So it's like, I'm going to get whatever I work hard and want. So now I need to drive this. And that it's working hard, but it's also advocating for yourself. And self advocacy is a skill that I think is highly underrated that we don't talk about enough, that a lot of people don't feel comfortable with, quite frankly. Like it's a little scary to advocate for yourself, especially because some spaces are not particularly safe to do so. So, you might say, okay, I'm going to wear up on it. I'm going to put on my big girl pants and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to advocate for myself. And you might get shut down. It truly might happen. That doesn't mean you did it wrong or that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it again. That just means that that's a very challenging situation you're finding yourself in. And you better think long and hard if you are ever going to thrive in a situation like that, because most managers, they should be willing to listen to you. They should be willing to see what you bring to the table. They should be willing to coach you and say, Lucy, this is what you're doing great. I think you are almost ready for the next level. I think this is what's missing. I think this is what you need to focus on for the next 6 months. And then I do see you becoming a director, senior director, an SVP, whatever the next level is for you. So I think that is what we should expect, but that's not what we always get. Lots of times we get people, especially in this environment where employers really have the upper hand, they're going to be like, there might not be an opportunity for you. If you don't like it, there's a door. And then what, right? So you can't show all your cards when you're having these conversations, but you should be willing to advocate for yourself and practice advocating for yourself. And in the book, I say, here's low risk, here's medium risk, here's high risk. So I show you what it looks like. I give the reader examples. So it's like, then start small. You don't have to like go out there and be like, I demand this. Start with something simple and easy that you're comfortable with and build that muscle. And a través del tiempo, I think you will get more comfortable, and then you're going to ask for more, especially when you get positive outcomes, because the positive outcomes are going to be like encouragement. It's like, okay, that worked. I talked about getting promoted. I ended up getting promoted 6 months later. Wow, that actually worked. I'm going to keep doing that, but I'll do it for something else the next time.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for that. Another thing that I want to mention about your book, again, Calladita No More, is that every single chapter that you have, you also have these and resume chapter closings that you do, and you invite the reader to reflect and journal on their own story. And I think that's also very powerful because it's a book, but it's also a workbook for people to write on it and reflect on what they're going through. I want to bring something up that is not necessarily part of your book, but is happening right now, and that is the workplace right now. It's a little bit sticky for women more than it has ever been. What advice would you give to those mujeres that feel that they want to be there, but also at the same time, with everything happening in politics right now, specifically feel like maybe it's not the time to quote unquote rock the boat?
Yeah, it's a serious concern. And I think it really is a function of how much risk tolerance or how much risk are you willing to put up with. Like, if the conversation doesn't go well, are you willing to walk away? Are you able to walk away? Are you, that's a big thing. But regardless, if you say something out loud and you're advocating for yourself out loud or not, I think this is still a time where you could be planning and you could be strategizing and you could say, listen, I know that I need the money. I know the market's tight. I know it's not going to be easy for me to find another job. That does not mean that I can't plan ahead and be like, okay, within 18 months, I want to be out of here because I already know that I'm not going to thrive in this place. This is not a place where I'm going to do well. And you have to, again, this is a personal thing. It's like you have to know like I have people that I coach and they're like, I've been there 7 years and I haven't gotten promoted. I'm like, girlfriend, I would find another job if I was you because I don't think it's happening. But it also depends. Like, have you been having conversations? Have you said you wanted to get promoted? Have you been over like when you get your performance reviews, are you getting good reviews? So it's like if you're doing all the things and you're still not getting promoted, then that might not be the space where you're going to grow. And you have to decide, do I want to stay here with the salary I have and the secure job security I have? Or do I want to take a chance and go out on my own? Or do I want to like, team up with someone else? Or do I just want to enter the job market, do a low key job search, low key kind of in secreto type of thing. And I hint that there people do that all the time. People are starting side hustles all the time. You might say, you know what? I'm going to stay here for 18 more months, but in the meantime, I'm going to start a side hustle. And I hope that within 18 months, I have, sorted out all the kinks such that in 18 months, if things don't change, I could just launch my own business. So it's like you could still be planning and you don't have to say anything to anybody. That's what I would tell people now. That's one side of it. If you don't want to say anything, if you don't want to rock the boat, just plan, low key plan, low key strategize, low key figure out what you want to do. But you could also, you don't have to be silent. You could also say things. And, I don't think that most people will get fired for just advocating for themselves. I think it's really important to prepare for conversations like that and maybe practice. If you've not had like self-advocacy conversations in the past, they can get a little uncomfortable. So maybe you find somebody to practice with, whether it's a coach, a friend, an amiga, a bestie, somebody, and just be like, hey, I want to talk to my boss about getting promoted. Here's like some of the points that I wanted to bring up, and here's how I would respond if they say this, and like, give me some feedback. So I feel like you can still advocate for yourself, but just prepare and and understand that not everything might go your way, and you also have to be patient because not everything is going to happen overnight. So lots of times I had to be patient in my career. No era que I don't know.
I love it.
When the time came, I was like, ciao. And it was funny. There was one job, I'll never forget this. There was one job where me trataron mal, pero mal. And I was really hurt. And I knew that I wanted to leave. And I ended up getting recruited by another company. And in the meantime, I was doing a really good job in that the job that I was in. I was excellent performer. They were thinking like they were like, wow, she's great. And they knew, and they were like, wow, she was mad the other day and now she's like performing so great. She must not be mad anymore. And then one day out of nowhere, I was like, by the way, you have my 2 weeks notice. My last day is gonna be tal dia. And they were like, oh, we thought that you were good here. I'm like, no, y'all did me dirty. I haven't forgotten that. But I have my reputation and I'm always gonna perform as best as I can. And when I'm ready to leave, that's when I leave. It's not when you're ready, it's when I'm ready. And so I would just tell people, get ready. And I talk about that in the book, the notion of being ready and getting ready and staying ready, because you don't know when the opportunities come.
You're like the amiga that we all wish we had, or at least I know, like me, like when I was in corporate, I'm like, man, if I had her back then, I would totally be a different person. But also, things happen for a reason, and if I would have stayed, I probably never met you, and I would never read your book. Now, I want to ask you a little bit more about you as a person and some of the things that you love. I didn't know that you were into photography. Tell me about
Yes.
that.
Yeah, so I'm actually, I guess I don't do it as much anymore. So I would say maybe I'm a retired amateur street art photographer. And I used to travel the country, the world, taking pictures of street art everywhere. I mean, I still have all the pictures and I can still like tell you stuff that I learned along the way. But I lived in South America for a little while. So I went to Buenos Aires, I went to Brazil. Sao Paulo has great street art. So does Buenos Aires, by the way. So they both are really nice street art places. I lived in Bolivia and there was street art there too. And it's, a developing country, but like street art is the voice of the people, which is why I think I like it so much because it's like a reflection of the sentiment of the people. And, in places like Bolivia where I live, which was a very poor developing country, a lot of it was around like struggle. It was around like la mujer, a lot around women's rights. The women there are indigenous women and they're like not treated very well. So there was a lot of street art that was like them in their like braids or their top hats and things that were like honoring them because they were a group of people that was suffering. In New York where I live, street art is some of the best street art in, like I was saying, the United States, we have some of the best street art. I think San Francisco has good street art and Miami has good street art. So it's like, I remember I was in a business trip in Hawaii and my flight got delayed and I had like 6 hours and I was like, me boy. And I took a taxi and I went to the like, I looked up local street art. I went there, took a bunch of pictures, and I came back to the airport and I had my street art pick. So
I love
yeah,
it.
it's a little bit addicting,
I
but
love
it's
it. You're
fun
the
too.
you're the second guest that talks about these. We had another founder from Plural. He had
Yeah,
Pavel
Pavel.
Martinez.
Pavel, yeah, I know him.
He had on his
En la
studio.
pared. Yeah, he has like about 100 pictures and
Yeah, and I
frames.
was like, I'm so because I came very prepared for the interview, and I kept getting distracted looking at the art. And so I said, okay, I need to pause and ask you because my brain was like, just ask about these. So that
Yes.
is fascinating that you.
He and I have a lot of the same pictures. He has some cool pictures from Puerto Rico, which I also have. And it's nice because the cool thing about it, and I'm reminded of that whenever I see his wall, is that some of these pieces are not there anymore. But like for people who know it, we're like, oh, I know that's Puerto Rico, that's the Bronx, that you took that picture in Wynwood in Miami. Like we recognize it because
I love
some of
it.
the pieces are pretty recognizable. So it's kind of cool. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna be chismosa about this because I didn't know that about you, and it's always nice to learn something new. Now, Hadi, where can people find your book?
Yeah, it's available wherever books are sold. So I would say you could go to your local bookstore. You could order it. If it's not available at the bookstore, you could put in a special order, or you could just go online. It's available on bookshop.org, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon. I have it available in 4 formats. So there's the ebook, the paperback, the hardcover, and then I have the audiobook version, which is available on Audible. So I narrated it myself, and that's like a whole other story. But I love that version of it. It's very like, you talked about how reading it felt like you were talking to somebody you knew. I think listening to it, everybody who's listened to it, especially people who know me, they're like, girl, I feel like that felt like I was having a conversation with you the whole time. Like it was ridiculous how much it
I love
sounded
it.
like you. So I wrote it the way I talk. And so it was really easy to make an audiobook from it.
Your energy is so contagious. Like when you're talking and you're like, this happened to me and I knew, and I'm like, yes, tell me more. Like very captivating. That's the word I'm looking for.
All right. Oh,
Very
that's good to hear.
captivating storytelling. And I'm just like, I want to hear you. Tell me more. Tell me more. So
That's
I
great
have
to
not
hear.
checked the audible version of it, but I totally will. Reading this for me was also part of a healing chapter of my life. So I also want to say thank you for reading this because so many other women also need to read your book. It was so healing. It connected me back with my mom at a different level where I was like, "Mom, check this out. Remember this?" And so it was a lot of nostalgia coming back between my mom and I, which we don't always have like the perfect relationship, but it was a way to just kind of bring us together. So thank you so much for writing this book.
That's a nice side effect. I was not aware that that was something that could happen through the book. So thank you for sharing that with
Yeah,
me.
los refranes, they were amazing. So, Hadi, thank you so much for coming to the show. We're gonna also link the book, your website, to the show notes so people can find you. And I want to leave with what is your definition of wealth?
I love that. Listen, for me, I always say that I don't need a lot of money. I don't need to be quote unquote rich in the traditional sense of the word. I want to be comfortable for sure, like secure, like not worrying that I'm going to be on the street tomorrow. I want to pay my bills. I want to eat. I want to have a bed to lie on every night. But I think wealth is a lot related to me. Wealth is related to the people that you're surrounded with, the kindness that people show you, and the like how people receive you, that people te tratan bien, that they appreciate you, that you feel seen. But that was such an important part of the book for me to make other people, women like us, feel seen. And I feel like that to me, that's very gratifying. And that's how I would define wealth. But not so much the money part. The money part is necessary, but it's not the only thing. I think the feeling and that joy and that connection is so much more important.
I love it. Well, Hadi, thank you for coming to the show. And you're such as like big on strategizing your moves. So I can only imagine what is coming up for you. But hopefully we get to see you again here on the show.
Gracias. Thank you so much for having me. Ciao, audience.
Thank you.